Hello and welcome back to War Thunder. Welcome back aboard the Su-6. Now I have already made 2 videos on the Su-6, but this one is just, this plane serves as background footage for a completely different video. This is more of a guide how to ground strike. Yes, I made certain arguments on other videos, but not all of them combined. Now this is a general video, so don't expect too many detailed informations about the Su-6 as I covered them in a video especially about this plane. Now the tips that I give you work for generally all planes, but they are meant for ground strikers, and you could see the first 2 tips that I could give you right here. First of all, check the leaderboard to know how many other planes of which designation are on your own team, as this is important for the tactics that you use later on, because there are generally 2 ways of playing a ground striker, in a solo way or in a team way. And I'm not talking about clan members or other people that you went into a squad. I mean if you avoid the main action and go around the map to find some solo ground units or bases, whatever you want to attack, and deal with it, or if you want the protection of your team. If you want the protection of your team, you need to give your teammates chance to first of all catch up with you and also bring themselves into protection, where they first could intercept with people that want to kill you, or they actually can help if somebody actually broke through the lines. Those are very important things to know, because I can't stand people that have an air spawn, go into a sharp dive where they get really fast, are in the middle of the combat zone and find themselves attacked by enemy fighters, and then blame the team for not being there if the team actually had no chance at all to help them. So that's the first. Give your team the chance to catch up and actually give you cover. If they want or not want to help you, doesn't matter. The important part is that they are there, and they will help you directly or indirectly, because nobody loves it more than to shoot at low altitude slow fighters trying to shoot down a lonely ground attacker as your own teammates, because it's an easy kill for them. And that brings me to the next part. You need to do defensive flying to actually give your teammates the time to go near you. They might be in close vicinity, but to be actually around you in a vicinity of a kilometer where they immediately can help you is a different matter. So you also have to think about that not everybody is willing to sacrifice altitude to help you. A lot of people think that ground attackers are worth nothing and are a bane for their own team, as they rarely can carry anything. But that was basically the introduction. Let's begin from the very first with what you have to do as a ground attacker. It begins with the upgrades. You need to go into the right direction and for the right upgrades. Performance upgrades for the engine are not as important as weapon upgrades, as they are the damage dealer, so to speak. You are there to kill tanks, bases, and other stuff that actually flies around or swims around or drives around. And that needs you to focus on your main armament. And there are basically 2 types of ground attackers with focus on their firepower. There are ordnance fighters or ground strikers, and then there are also cannon ground strikers. For the Su-6 we actually have both. We have 2 very powerful 37mm cannons with actually a lot of ammunition, and you need to focus on upgrading them. Furthermore, you have also a bomb load and a rocket load. Which actual load you take for each individual plane is up to you. It also depends on the map. For example, if you have the American premium Groundstrike aircraft, the BTD, you have the choice between 2 torpedoes or a bomb load. And if you're on Norway, you should use the torpedoes. It doesn't make sense to go for one ship with 1 bombs if you could destroy 2 ships with your both torpedoes. Just saying it. It depends on the map, it depends on the teams that you face, and the teams you play with, and the targets that are there. And the targets also can change from map to map, and also on the same map depending on the battle rating. This is also a very big topic on its own, and I can't go into too much detail in this video. Then, when you go into, obviously, the match, you have to look at the leaderboards, you have to know which enemies you're likely to face, you have to know the location where the ground targets are, and then it comes to the very next big decision. Which ground units to prioritize? And there are 2 ground units you should focus on. First of all, the ones that are valuable for your team to gain a points advantage or a score points advantage that can at the end lead to a victory, or can make things easier for your team. And then also the ones that give you yourself the most points. If you drop a 1,000 pound bomb on a AAA vehicle, that was not the best use of your payload, which is also the very next topic. Which weapons to use against which target. It depends. Now you can destroy light pillboxes, for example, with 50 cal ammunition from under 400 meters if you have your conversions set right. Just saying. Now actually going for the ground units, to choose the right way, is also up to you. As I said in the beginning, there are 2 ways of how to do it, either with your team or on a solo way. With your team, it's very simple. You circle around until your team has catched up to you or goes into the main combat zone. A very good example is this battle here on Krim's alternative history, as the ground units, from your perspective, are near the main combat zone. So you automatically have enemies around you, and you also have a lot of teammates around you. Now, normally the Russians have a big advantage in their fighter lead, and you can also always, expect somebody to be there. The next point is, just as a short interruption, is this one. When the airfield is so close to your target zone, it is actually fully worth it to land, repair, rearm, as it repairs damage, battle damage from AAA or enemy fighters. It gives you back your main hitting power most of the time, and also landing and also starting gives points again. And the reward for ground strikers, even for good ground strikers, is divided into 2 parts. Score points wise, you're very often at the top of the leaderboard, but from pure XP and credits earning, you don't get that much for a rather hard work style. So, let's go back to the beginning when you decide to go solo. What do you have to do? First of all, map knowledge, knowing where the targets are and also where the main flying routes of the enemy are, most of the time, is an important knowledge to have for this one. You should fly very low to the ground for 2 reasons. First of all, you come to a point where the enemy doesn't expect you to go that fast. And second of all, you're very low to the ground, which actually activates some kind of spotting mechanic. And that is that you just don't appear that early on the radar. Normally, fighters detect each other at around about 10 kilometers when they are on same altitude. When you are very low to the ground, and I mean really low, like under 100 meters above the ground, so you actually have to follow the terrain, as you will see in a moment, you don't get spotted. Even when fighters are relatively close to you, like 5-6 kilometers, they very often don't detect you or don't look in your vicinity when you are actually appearing on the radar, as they simply don't appear on their visual radar, like Mark 1 eyeball. And that also has to do with that you don't go for the obvious ground units. Now here on Krimsk, the most obvious ground units to go for, and the enemy mostly knows this, is directly on the harbor of Port Novosibirsk. I hope I pronounced it right. I once could. And a lot of fighters just even don't bother to climb, as they are okay with dying after 5 minutes but having farmed 1 or 2 Groundstrike aircrafts. You want to avoid this as being a ground striking aircraft. So you actually could go around and flank on the left side on this map, for example, and go deep and low and just go for the tanks on the between the second and third mini base. That gives you a lot of time to harvest tanks, which also is another topic. You can do it with this aircraft, but not with every other aircraft. How to aim rockets I mentioned on the Sky Raider video, where I did a perfect attack run, so watch it again. Here currently I am flying to finish off the last or the first mini base, which is heavily damaged, and to destroy the mini base gives you additional points. It's not that much, but better than nothing. And I dropped all my bombs because I think that rockets are more accurate for me to drop, as those are small 50 kilogram bombs. And then I see on the radar a lonely tank column, and what you're about to see happening is when something is bugged. Yes, things can be bugged. Another example of ground units being bugged would be the heavy cruisers on Saipan. I found this out the last few days, that when you drop a torpedo on them, the torpedo detonates but doesn't give you actual points for hitting the target, which also doesn't die. Now I don't know if this is a recent bug or this is a bit longer in the game, and you will see on this attack run that the first tank goes down easily, but the second doesn't, despite hitting them. And you will see in a moment, after numerous attack runs, how I will deal with this situation. Now I think at this point everything is said, but I will summarize it again for you. First, search for the optimal weapon layout that you need to deal with the targets, and also, you know, depending on the map and the teams you are on. Then check the leaderboards to know at which battle rating you are. Are you up tiered? Are you down tiered? So you have more precise informations. Also, are you the only ground striker on your team, or is half of your team made out of bombers and ground strike aircrafts? Then, if you go for the team way of fighting, then wait for your team to actually have the possibility to cover you. So do circles right at the beginning of the battles around the airfield, and also communicate with your team. If you want to do it the solo way, try to avoid the obvious targets depending on the map, fly very low so you are literally under the radar of the enemy, and avoid to rush into the enemy main climbing path. Don't do anything obvious. And this is a risky game, by the way, as you also can run into enemy ground strikers that's, you know, do the very same or have the very same idea. Then know your targets. Know with which of your weapons you can deal with which target. When you get attacked, give your team the opportunity to help you. First, communicate with your team by giving out the position that you need help, and what the enemy is, which plane or which situation you're in. Then also fly towards your teammates if possible, and also do evasive flying. Don't fly in a straight line. Make it very hard for the enemy. Very often they do numerous attack runs or do stupid things like going into head-on situations, which you actually want as a ground striker, as you mostly have big cannons. Overall, you need to invest a lot of patience and time, and also have to expect a relatively low income with doing this, at least with non-premium aircrafts. Also, you have to learn from the matches you were in. You may also watch the replay, may look at certain situations, how they develop. This is obviously a tip not just for ground strikers, but also for fighters and other types of aircraft. Then know your plane and your limits is something you just know from looking at the stat card, looking at the upgrades, and basically flying it out, trying it out. You will never be a master if you don't practice. Then also the teams and the flow of the battle can rapidly change. Most of the time this is when new planes get introduced and they get spammed out. For example, here the Su-6. A lot of the times a big part of your team consists of other ground strikers. And enemy teams, especially British and American teams, tend to very fast adapt to this situation. They don't bother climb at all. Sometimes, they do, but very often when this situation that enemy planes get spammed out, they just fly directly in and feast on them. This is then a situation where you should consider flying solo and try to avoid the obvious flying path of your team. Overall, ground striking is something very challenging. It is something different if you have certain aircrafts that you want to try out. It is also highly frustrating as you don't not only have the enemy team as your enemies, but also the terrain, trees, hills, they also can kill you. You have to be very exact with your flying. You have to aim very precise, as very often you don't have or you have a very limited weapon layout. And also to actually help your team is rather challenging. There are a few exceptions, like the duck, because you can rely on enemies going head-on with you, which you actually want, as you have a lot of very powerful, very reliable weapons with a lot of ammunition. It also gave me the opportunity to go into realistic battles. When I switched from arcade to realistic, it was so nice to see that suddenly certain planes that had absolutely no business in arcade were actually rather useful in realistic, aka the duck became alive. Now, at this point, we are approaching the end of the battle, and I just let it run out. Let's have a quick look at the post-battle results screens, and we can see that for 15 ground units and 24 hits in total, I just got 68,000 silver lines and 4,062 research points. That's not a lot for a 20-minute battle that I put a lot of effort in. But there is, something else that you can do, and that has to do with war bonds. Sometimes missions pop up that have to do with the place in the team. And with over 10,000 score points, I'm definitely on top of the leaderboards. And there you can see this match not just finished the grind on the last weapons upgrade, rocket-wise, it also gave me the opportunity to fully research the belts for my 7.62mm machine guns. I think that's it for today. I hope you got some useful tips. Let me know in the comment section if you have also some additional tips and tricks, and give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and see you in the skies of War Thunder.